welcome to round 4 of season 6 of the GT3 Championship. This is tier 7 and round 4 takes place at Mount Panorama in Australia, a favourite track for some, a despised track for others. But before we get to tonight's round action, let's have a look back at the Hungaroring, the previous round, round 3. A wet race all the way through, so very difficult with lots of spins. And on the opening lap into turn 3, big disaster. Uras taking to the grass under braking just as he comes under the bridge, slides across the grass and into the pack, sends cars scattering all over the track, and quite a number of drivers having incidents as a result of that, and carrying damage throughout the rest of the race. The front half of the pack though got away cleanly, but the scene was set with Dyer leading from pole across the line at the end of the first lap, but Hitchcock making a statement very early doors. This is turn 1 on the start of the second lap. Dyer only just misses him as he does a bit of a dive bomb up the inside, but ends up on the runoff area. Kangsep in third did an attack on Hitchcock after that mistake, but Hitchcock held him off and retained second place. But it was the Audis who really seemed to suffer at the Hungaroring. This is Rob Fodor on one of the opening laps, going wide towards the end of the lap and letting everybody through. Rob dropped right down the order on this opening lap from a decent qualifying position. But also in the Audi again, Jordan Watson spinning on the final hairpin and ended up stranded for quite some time. Again, dropping right down the order, and it kept seeming to be Audis all the way through the race that were having a lot of trouble with their handling in the rain. But it wasn't just the Audis. The 2 Honda NSX drivers who've joined the league, this one being Hendrik Sarwas, usually do really well. Well, Hendrik ended up pointing the wrong way down the track after losing the rear end there. And another Audi struggling a little in the rain, Conal McCarthy just ahead of the Beeswax racing car. All over the track there, coming out of the chicane, struggling for grip. So the Aston Martin was able to get by quite easily. And again, Rob Fodor later in the race still got those issues in the damp track. Loses the rear end, ends up on the grass, takes a while to recover, tumbling right down the field. Rob having recovered up to 7th place at this point of the race, but not looking good at all. A big mistake by Jason Dyer from the lead of the race. Just as he was pitted in there, Kangsep just ate massive length of distance out of him as he slowed down way too early for the pit lane line, and as a result Kangsep also got out of the pits ahead of Dyer. So Dyer losing a position just by being slow on the pit entry. A few laps later, Dami Ayo, who was leading the race at the time, pitted in, looking in a good position for a good result, but put the wrong tyres on, fitted dry tyres in what is definitely a very wet race, and lost a dozen places on his outlap with the wrong tyres on. Had to pit again immediately and disappeared out of the running. Nyns led the race for a short while by virtue of leaving his pit stop till quite long into the race. And in the change of rounds during the pits, it was Hitchcock who ended up in front of Kangsep and Dyer. So once Nyns pits, it'll be Hitchcock to the front of a race. And having let us down so far early for the first 2 rounds, Nyns finally got his Spinsy in. I knew getting that livery done with the Spinsy on the roof would be worthwhile in the end. It was a quick recovery and into the pits, but that was Nyns' brief moment of glory before he had to do his pit stop before the end of a race, leaving Hitchcock to move into first place, a position he held on to right up to the end of the race. So Hitchcock across the line in first, Kangsep finishing in second, and Jason Dyer, following that small mistake going into the pits, finishes in third place. So looking at the Drivers' Championships, Matt Cooley in first place. Matt Cooley finished 4th at the Hungaroring, making it 2 4th places and a 3rd so far this season. He's 46 points clear of Jason Dyer, who's in second. Jason missed out on the Suzuka round, but is definitely breathing down Matt's neck having had pretty good results in every race he's turned out for so far. Paul Hinsley slipped down into 3rd place for Big Boatley. Wilfred Bugil was 4th. Robert Fodor dropped down to 5th. John Becker of FTW Racing, RacingSimTools.com is in 6th. Ivor Kangsep, who had a disaster at Suzuka which really pulled down his points, he's climbed back up to 7th place. Jamie Ellis is in 8th place. In 9th, it's Ben Hitchcock for the 488 team. That victory really lifting him up the championship. And in 10th is Hendrik Sarwas. Hendrik didn't have a great race at the Hungaroring, struggling in the rain, but he had a victory at Suzuka and did not partake in round 1, so doing pretty well to be in 10th place in the championship, having only driven 2 rounds. Looking at the team's championship coming away from the Hungaroring, the 488 team are at the head of the table. In 2nd place is McVitie's Hobnobs. In 3rd, FTW Racing, RacingSimTools.com. There's a bit of a gap there from 2nd to 3rd, 49 points at the moment, but that could close up at any point if Dan Smith or John Becker get a good result. Big Boatley are in 4th. Beeswax Racing, who had a decent race at the Hungaroring, they lift up to 5th place. Then there's a bit of a gap down to Merckx and Recreation down in 6th. TWG Racing are in 7th. And rounding out the field, it's Phoenix Racing in 8th place. Let's move on and have a look at the outcome from qualifying at Bathurst. It's nice, good, warm conditions for this round, unlike the Hungaroring. The air temperature of 23 degrees and the track temperature matches that. But the race will be taking place at 6 AM and finishing at 7:30, so it's going to be quite cool, but not in any way difficult conditions for the drivers. Qualifying on pole position, a new driver to Tier 7 for this season, Brandon Baker, in a time of 2:02.352. Alongside a familiar face from qualifying, Hendrik Sarwas gets 2nd place this time round on quali. On row 2, it's Jordan Watson, alongside another familiar face from qualifying, Ivar Kangsep, this time gets 4th place. On row 3, it's Paul Hinsley, a Big Boatley, alongside Martin Orjaz. Row 4, it's ex-FSR Torpedo alongside Matt O'Brien. Row 5, it's Harlan Hatter alongside Robert Fodor. Robert will be looking for a better result from last week when he was struggling a bit in the rain. On row 6, it's John Becker of FTW Racing, RacingSimTools.com, the first driver to be 1 second behind the leaders, alongside Matt Cooley, current championship leader of McVitie's Hobnobs. Row 7, it's Conor McCarthy alongside Ben Hitchcock of the 488 team, last week's winner. Row 8, it's Tripp of McVitie's Hobnobs alongside Wilfred Bugil. On row 9 is Luca Ziga of the 488 team alongside Paul Scott of Big Boatley. Row 10 is Dami Ayo of TWG Racing alongside Kevin Rumsing, a new driver also to Tier 7. Row 11 is Andre Kuchar of Merckx and Recreation alongside Sindri Ragnarsson of TWG Racing. Row 12 is Jamie Ellis alongside Adam Bowers. Adam's got a drive-through penalty handed down from his stewards from previous rounds. Row 13, it's Steve Bezic of Beeswax Racing alongside Nick Kononov. Steve Bezic being the first driver just 2 seconds behind the leaders. On row 14, it's Lord Nem of Phoenix Racing alongside Domagoj Tonsitic. Row 15, it's Daniel Smith of FTW Racing, RacingSimTools.com alongside George Doras. Row 16, it's Daniel Oppenheisen, who's also got a drive-through penalty, alongside Nils Nyns of Beeswax Racing. On row 17, it's Steph Farrell, who's the final driver with a drive-through penalty this week, alongside Radomir Kazierski of Phoenix Racing. And rounding out the field, it's Peter Pizet in his Porsche 991. The drivers with a drive-through penalty will have 3 laps from the start of the race to serve the penalty. If they fail to do so, they will be disqualified, so I'm pretty certain they're going to get that done. So it's time to move on to the actual race. The drivers come around the last corner of a lap, line up on the start-finish straight, 2 abreast, ready for the rolling start. The lights will change as they cross the start-finish line. It's Brandon Baker leading out the rest of the field. Brandon's first race in this season. I don't know if he's got previous experience, but maybe quite daunting to lead out the entire pack. And they come down to the first corner, Hell Corner, taking it quite tentatively as they all try and get round 3 abreast there, which is quite brave. But in the middle of the pack, it's nose to tail on the inside of the corner. Somebody braking too much. Number of cars concertina into each other. And very slow to get away. But first time down Mountain Straight, Brandon leading out the rest of the pack. And we'll track with them. And that is the nature of Bathurst. Very, very long, very, very straight bits of track followed by the mountain, which is basically single file. Definitely no way you can do an overtake manoeuvre on the mountain unless you've got a massive speed difference or a whole lot of skill. And at the end of Mountain Straight, it's a right turn into Quarry. Brandon still leading the rest of the pack through. So far, no accidents, but you'd hope so on a perfectly straight bit of track. And then it's through the cutting with a difficult left-hander that rears right up in front of the drivers. Everybody's still looking okay there, coming through a first difficult section of the circuit. And Brandon still leading the pack through with Jordan Watson on his tail. Sarwas having dropped back to third with Kangsep right behind him. And you can see the nature of the circuit here as the drivers climb up to the top of the mountain. It's very, very tight with walls on either side, so the moment you make a tiny mistake, which is easy given the twisty nature of the circuit, your car is damaged and you're tumbling down the field. So all drivers expecting this race to be more a case of surviving rather than battling each other. It's right over the top of the mountain now. A very, very short straight with a very, very tall wall alongside you to your right. As you begin the turn back towards Skyline. And when you're in the car, it looks like you're just going to fly straight off the mountain. The cars are coming towards us right now. And it's Brandon who still leads, with Watson right behind him. And as you can see, the cars coming through pretty much in single file. Very dangerous to try and overtaking manoeuvre on the mountain. And it's descending through perhaps the most difficult part of the circuit, the S's. A number of switchbacks as you go down the mountain. Very easy to make a small mistake. And that's exactly what happens. Luca Ziga there going into the wall on the left. And then just a few seconds later, Lord Nem and another Aston Martin spinning out, causing a blockage on the track. And everybody stops to try and get through without incurring a bit more damage themselves, being ultra careful on the first lap. But that puts Lord Nem and the other Aston straight to the back of the field. Meanwhile, coming out of the S's, it's through Forest Elbow, the last corner on that complex. And it's on to Conrod Straight for the main field. A bit of a gap appearing following that mishap. Coming down through, past Skyline and through the S's. But it's still Brandon Baker leading out the field with Watson behind him. Sarwas and Kamsek rounding out the first four. Challenge on Conrad Straight as you approach the tricky corner of the chase is getting your braking point right. There's very little to be able to use as reference points apart from the brake markers at the side of a track, and the chances of those surviving a full 90-minute race are quite slim. So drivers tend to be overcautious sometimes, brake in good time to be able to make the left-hander of the chase. So it's round the left and right switchback, drop down towards the final corner, Murray's corner, and then it's start finish straight in the end of the first lap. And the start of another 90 minutes of racing before we find out who's going to be the victor at round 4. Coming into that first lap, Brandon completely overcooks it on Murray's corner, goes straight into the barriers, takes a heavy hit to the front of his car and will lose a number of places. And a little bit later on the second lap, this time it's Kangsep at the top of the mountain, just loses the rear end of a car and ends up spearing off to the left and into the wall. And just as Kangsep's recovering, it's Andrei Kuchar who loses it next on the bend just before going into Skyline. Just loses the rear end of his Mercedes, slides right into the gravel trap. Quickly tries to get back on track though. And it's incident after incident. This is John Becker, remember, who's angling for the championship, going up the cutting, loses the rear end, swings into the barriers on the right hand side, and he's really trapped there. Started at 12th position, but most of the field is coming past him as he's unable to get turned around without driving right into the racing line. So he's stuck, going right towards the back of the field. And this was a pattern for most of this race. Make a mistake and you're really going to tumble down the order. Still waiting for a clear bit of track. They needn't at this late time. Some of the stragglers coming through following some of the earlier incidents are preventing John from being able to get back into the race. So currently showing 26. Real nightmare. He's having to do a very much Austin Powers 95-point turn to try and get turned around as well. I imagine there's a bit of choice language behind the steering wheel. Eventually John gets underway again, but he's dropped from 12th all the way down to 30th. Just a couple of laps later, here at the cut-in going up the mountain, and Steve Bezic loses the rear end of his Aston Martin for Beeswax Racing. Ends up trapped on the inside on the racing line as everybody's coming towards him. Spots a small gap, manages to pull forward, but doesn't want to go back down the mountain. So he's trapped again, just like John trying to do a 3-point turn. As everybody's coming past, spots another gap. Manages to get it round while clipping the barrier a little bit, but gets away eventually. We're only 5 laps in. You see XFSR Torpedo and Hitchcock all going off in sympathy with each other. Again, at the top of the mountain, just turning in for Skyline. And we join Ivor Kangsep, usually well up the field. Just losing it going down towards the chase. Ends up right in the gravel trap behind the barriers. And has to rejoin. Ivor now down into 8th place. We're only on the 8th lap. So the order changing, all based on drivers making mistakes on the mountain. And that is the reputation of Bathurst. It's very rarely it's about who can battle who. As Kuchar spins out again in front of Dan Smith, aero smudge. He manages to avoid him. Kuchar tries to get going in the gravel trap again. I'm sure this is a race he doesn't want to remember. And that looked like Ragnarsson also going off just ahead of Kuchar. Let's follow it. Yep, it is Sindri Ragnarsson. Gets his tank slapper on. Going towards Skyline. Ends up going heavy into the barriers there. But a slow-moving car on the mountain is something really to worry about. And it's Nyns having a bit of a spinsy. He did that last week, didn't he, at the Hungaroring? Oh, he gets clipped heavy there by the Ferrari as he gets stuck against the wall. So big damage to the back of the Aston Martin. And Ragnarsson looks to have, if that is Ragnarsson or Damiayo, hard to tell from that angle. Grinds to a halt, possibly damaged their car quite heavily as well. And we pick up the action with the other Beeswax Racing car on lap 7. Coming into the final corner, trying to trace down Darras, misjudges it and slides off the track, catches the front of the car quite heavy in the barriers. And Oppenheisen behind is having a look, comes start finish straight, thinks better of it, comes back in for round hell corner. But that Aston Martin looks heavily damaged from that impact in the wall. The bonnet popped up straight away. And it looks like Oppenheiser's sizing up a pass on the mountain straight. And if that Aston Martin is damaged, it won't be able to put up much of a fight. And he's alongside. And he's through. So Oppenheiser takes that place away from the Beeswax Racing car. Right way down the field though, 25th and 24th position being exchanged there. But we cut to the pits and we can see that both Beeswax cars are now in the pits together. Nils Nyns there getting repairs and clearly the damage to that Aston Martin too much to carry on. So Nyns currently shown as 22nd on the sidebar. But we cut back on the track. Nyns misjudging it a few laps later, coming down towards Forest Elbow. Then gets a weird traction and ends up on the grass, recovers. Nyns now in 23rd position, but that's his teammate just come right into shot there. 24th place Steve Bezic, caught up for 15 seconds in just a few laps, and Nyns really not enjoying this trip to Bathurst, and they're coming down to Conrod Straight, and the other Aston is catching and catching. Coming into the chase, they're side by side, but the A3 free car's got the inside line. Give space, but Nyns slides into the grass. And I can tell you, I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. The A3 free car goes through. Nyns pushed back down one place. And teammates now separated by quite a gap. And the A3 free car pulling away from Nyns. We catch up with John Watson. Spinning the car just at Forest Elbow. Another very difficult place to get stuck. So Jordan trying to recover, waiting for a gap in traffic to get turned around. All the cars going past him, and he was in second place, so he'll be desperate to get going. But it takes too long to complete his manoeuvre, and Conor McCarthy comes round the corner with no chance whatsoever to break for him. Straight in there, and there was another Nissan. Connell will have heavy damage to his car there. And Watson dropping out from second place. Well, probably with heavy damage on the side of his car, because Connell hit him at full speed there. And it's Harlan Hatter who's in fourth. Oh, disaster. Alexis took to the escape road, but then ended up sliding back into the middle of the track. So Harlan Hatter, who was in fourth, gave it a broadside, and that'll have done heavy damage, and he recovers to the pits. We pick up with Matt O'Brien, another Nissan GTR driver. He's clipped that wall, clipped the other wall, and it spun the car. I've damaged both ends, and that'll be a lot of heavy damage, having it bounced all the way down the barriers. He's not moving anywhere at the moment, so that's looking like Matt's position in 8th has really gone away from him. Definitely going to have to pit for repairs. And I think the one thing we haven't seen so far in this race is any passing manoeuvres as we catch up with Paul Hinsley. Catches a curb, unsettles the rear of the car, and it goes heavy into the wall at the side. And it's Hinsley trying to make a recovery. Well, he drives into the wall there. Too impatient, trying to get going again, and now he's right in the middle of a track trying to do a recovery. And that was Hinsley, who was in second place. And we join Marcin Oljaz coming up towards Skyline. Now he's in second there. Has been a cursed position so far. And it is for Marcin as well. Car's right in the middle of a track there as he comes over the crest of Skyline. That'll be heavy damage. Will he hold on to second? And let's have a look at what happens just before then. It's Oppenheisen who loses the car. Slides into the gravel trap and ends up sliding back across the track, catching the two Bentleys. And it's Paul Scott was the other Bentley involved. Comes round the corner just as the accident's happening. And ends up going right into the Mercedes. So a number of cars there involved in that one incident. And Scott's car looks heavily damaged there against the wall. But the big loser was Marcin Oljaz from second place. Possibly not hanging on to that position following that incident. We'll pick up now with Wilfred Bagil in third place, Hinsley in second. Bagil doesn't seem to have a lot of speed here as we come down Conrod Straight. Hinsley's making pretty easy work. It's unusual. These cars are so well balanced against each other in terms of power, so got to presume Bagil's carrying some sort of damage there. But with 33 laps in, it's not worth pitting. He'd lose more places from pitting than he will do from a loss of speed. Because just a couple of laps later, it's Kangsep who's caught up with him. Kangsep, having recovered from a number of spins and trips into the pits for repairs, now moves into third place. Bagil down into fourth. Catch up with Lord and them coming down the mountain. And just a very strange exit there from Forest Elbow. Looks like the traction was caught him out a bit. And he went hard into the wall on the left, and the lap later he does pretty much the same thing. There's a number of cars coming past him. Lord Nem up to 11th place, a position to be quite pleased with. There is that position under threat with couple of trips into the wall. The damage will accumulate on the car, and that is a back marker behind him, but Lord Nem's going so slowly following that damage that the back marker's through, and Nem's off to the right into the grass and into the gravel trap. I think he'll have to go, trip into the pits for repairs following the accumulation of damage. Coming up towards the end of a race, it's Sarwas who wins. Sarwas who takes the victory, and I think it's a case of survival this week. Cooley coming in second place. So, well done to Cooley for surviving the mountain. Kangsep takes third place. Good recovery drive following a couple of incidents early on in the race. Let's have a look at the official race results from round 4 at Mount Panorama. Across the line in first place, it's Hendrik Sarwas. In second, it's Matt Cooley of McVitie's Hobnobs. Third place went to Ivor Kangsep. Wilfred Bajil finished in fourth, carrying that damage all the way to the line. Jordan Watson, despite the damage incurred with that spin at Forest Elbow, finishes in fifth place. Domagoj Tonzitic finishes in sixth. Radomir Kazierski of Phoenix Racing finishes in 7th. Daniel Smith of FT Racing, RacingSimTools.com finished in 8th. Nick Kononov finished 9th, and Peter Pizet drove all the way from the back of the field to finish in 10th, so well done to Peter. In 13th place, it was Dami Ayo of TWG Racing. Ben Hitchcock of the 488 team finished in 14th. Paul Scott of Big Boatley finished in 16th. Tripp of McVitie's Hobnobs was 17th. And the other 488 driver, Luca Ziga, finished in 18th. Looking at the second half of the field, it's Lord Nem from Phoenix Racing who finished in 19th. So that pit stop to damage right at the end of the race really cost him some places. Nyns of Beeswax Racing finished in 22nd. Andre Kuchar of Merckx and Recreation, after a nightmare race where we always seemed to cut to him when he was just in a gravel trap, finished in 25th. Steve Bezic of Beeswax Racing finished in 26th following a disconnection halfway through the race. Paul Hinsley of Big Boatley finished 27th. John Becker of FTW Racing, RacingSimTools.com 29th. Sindre Ragnarsson of TWG Racing finished in 33rd. In the Drivers' Championship, coming out of round 4, subject to any potential penalty points that may be awarded if there are any stewards' inquiries that go through, but I think most people's arguments this week were with the track rather than with each other. Matt Cooley of McVitie's Hobnobs still leads the championship. A good result today, a second place, means he's got 317 points. He's 80 points clear of second place Wilfred Bajil. Hendrik Sarwas, taking victory today, shoots up the table into third place. Ivor Kangsep, taking third place, also moves back up the table. So 2 Honda NSX drivers in 3rd and 4th. Jason Dyer is in 5th. Paul Hinsley of Big Boatley drops down to 6th. Ben Hitchcock of the 488 team still improves this week and moves up 2 places to 7th. Robert Fodor drops down to 8th place. He failed to finish this event as he had some technical issues with his hardware at his end, so unfortunate for Rob. Let's hope he can come back next week. Jamie Ellis is in 9th position. And John Becker of FTW Racing, RacingSimTools.com, will be disappointed to slip down to 10th. He had a bit of a nightmare race, finishing in 29th position. For the Teams Championship, it's an exchange of position at the top of the championship. McVitie's Hobnobs move back into first place with 375 points, and dropping 54 points behind them, it's the 488 team. In third place, no change for FTW Racing, RacingSimTools.com, followed by Big Boatley in 4th and Beeswax Racing in 5th. Phoenix Racing move up 2 places to 6th. TWG Racing are unmoved from 7th position, dropping down 2 places to 8th place. It's Merckx and Recreation. Andre Kuchar will definitely be looking for a better drive next time round at Imola, following a nightmare drive here at Bathurst. And this concludes the action from round 4 at Mount Panorama. Next round will be at Imola. Well, there's a week gap in the league, so the next race will be taking place on the 16th of February and will be live streamed on this channel from 7:30 as usual. Mount Panorama is the only 90-minute race this season, so it's 1 hour races all the way to the end now. With only 4 rounds remaining, is Matt Cooley going to retain his lead on the Drivers' Championship, or can one of the Honda NSX drivers challenge him? Based on the results they've been getting so far, it's got to be a surefire bet that they'll definitely have a go. And for the Teams Championship, the battle between Hobnobs and 488 is definitely pretty close, and there's every expectation that either FTW Racing, RacingSimTools.com or Big Boatley may be able to move up there and threaten the leaders. So please join us for the Imola round. I'll keep an eye open for the highlights. I hope you've enjoyed this show. Please leave a like and subscribe and leave a comment if you've got anything you want to add. See you later. Thanks for watching.